My CEO wife and I were reborn together, but I couldn't feel an ounce of happiness. The very first thing I did was try to find a way to leave her. I would rather die alone in this life than ever cross paths with her again. In my past life, I married her in a daze, captivated by her beauty. But our marriage brought me no affection from her. Instead, I had to endure the constant mockery of her first love. So this time, I struck a deal with him. For every opportunity one created for them to be together, he would pay me. When my wife, Chloe, invited me to a movie, I gave the tickets to her first love, Julian. When she said she was coming home for dinner, I deadbolted the door, forcing her to spend the night at Julian's place. When she got a transfer to Washington, D.C. with a spot for only one dependent, I gave that spot to Julian without a second thought. So Chloe came home to find her clingy husband was no longer bothering her. When she forgot our anniversary to spend time with Julian, I didn't start a fight. I quietly filled out an application to study abroad. My plan was to return and dedicate my life to public service. When her friends joked that she and Julian were the perfect couple, I didn't argue. I simply decided to file for a unilateral divorce and grant them their wish. I stopped caring where she went or what she did. I was just waiting for the divorce papers to be finalized so I could exit this ridiculous three-way relationship for good. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office alone. "Hello, sir. I'd like to file for a unilateral divorce." I took the prepared documents from my bag and handed them over. The clerk examined them carefully before looking up at me. "Sir, we've received your petition. If you don't withdraw it within 30 days, the divorce will be finalized." I nodded, thanked him, and walked out the door with my bag in hand. As evening fell, the sun sank below the horizon, leaving a streak of brilliant color in its wake. A light breeze cut through the day's oppressive heat. Workers leaving the factory for the day rode past in small groups on their classic Schwinn bicycles, the cheerful ringing of their bells filling the air. No one would ever guess that I was living my life for the second time. In my last life, Chloe and I had been deeply in love. After we married, we moved into the residential complex provided by her work. She was busy, but she always came home to have dinner with me the moment she was done with her duties. She never forgot an anniversary or a birthday, always showering me with gifts and surprises. The allowance she gave me was more than generous, making me the envy of the entire compound. Everyone said I'd married well. Everyone envied our relationship, but only I knew the truth. There was always a third person in our world. Julian, the younger brother of Chloe's deceased best friend. On my birthday, she abandoned me to go shopping with Julian. During a thunderstorm, she left me to comfort Julian, who was afraid of the noise. When I was doubled over with stomach pain, she left me to check on Julian because he was feeling down. When the three of us went out for dinner, she ordered all of Julian's favorite spicy dishes, completely forgetting my stomach condition prevented me from eating them. When we went hiking, Julian stumbled and scraped his arm, and she immediately rushed him down the mountain, leaving me to find my own way to the hospital late that night after my own fall. There were countless other incidents just like these. It wasn't that I didn't get jealous or cause a scene. I even offered to give Julian half of our savings to set him up for life, if only Chloe would stop seeing him. But her excuse was always the same. "I only see him as a little brother. His sister is gone, and he has no one else to rely on but me. Can you please stop being so unreasonable?" That's what she claimed, but the adoration in Julian's eyes whenever he looked at her was unmistakable. I spent my entire last life fighting this losing battle. This time, I refused to be trapped in a love triangle, which is why the first thing I did after being reborn was to end this marriage for good. If Chloe knew I wanted out, she would never agree to sign the papers. That's why I had to file for a unilateral divorce, a process that only requires one party's petition. Once it's done, I'll be free. I'll leave this place and live the life I've always wanted, no longer shackled to her. But as I reached the gate of our residential complex, I froze. Chloe had insisted I quit my job after we got married. Now, with no income of my own, I couldn't guarantee my future, let alone afford a bus ticket out of town. Chloe gave me an allowance, but I had to account for every penny. A large, sudden withdrawal would immediately make her suspicious. So where was I going to get the money? After much thought, I made a bold decision. I would work with Julian, the man who had always loved her, and personally push Chloe right into his arms. I knocked on Julian's door and got straight to the point. "Julian, I have a business proposition for you. I know you're in love with Chloe. Starting today, I will create opportunities for the two of you to be alone. In return, you will pay me for each success. In 1 month, I will disappear from your lives completely." Julian stared at me, incredulous. Took him a moment to find his voice. "Ethan, is this some kind of joke? Me like Chloe? That's ridiculous. You and I both know it's not a joke." Seeing the resolve in my eyes, Julian finally started to take me seriously. He let out a cold laugh. Alright, so what if I do like Chloe? Why on earth should I trust you? My expression remained calm. I'll give you a reason to. I'll make sure she comes to your place for dinner tonight. You should probably start cooking her favorite dishes. Without waiting for his reaction, I turned and walked away. The moment I walked through my front door, our housekeeper greeted me, taking my bag. Sir, what would you like for dinner tonight? I glanced at the wall clock. Just a few simple, bland dishes tonight, I told her quietly. And only make enough for one person. Right on cue, the clock chimed, and the front door opened. I was in the middle of my meal and looked up as she entered, a woman of elegant, aristocratic grace, with long legs, a narrow waist, and a chilling coldness in her deep eyes. Chloe walked toward me, shrugging off her coat and handing it to the housekeeper. She was about to sit down when she noticed the food on the table, none of which she liked. She froze. Why is the food so bland tonight? In the past, food like this would never have been served in our house. If there was ever a mistake, I would have immediately gone to the kitchen myself to cook her the spicy dishes she loved. But now I didn't move a muscle. I felt like something bland, I said coolly. I picked up my fork and continued eating as if she wasn't there. Then I looked up at her. Julian has already cooked dinner at his place. She paused, a slight frown creasing her brow. But you've always hated it when I spend time with him. A bitter irony twisted inside me. So she knew all along. She knew how much I hated it, yet she still chose to leave me for him, time and time again. I met her gaze and smiled. You're the one who always told me to be more generous, that you only see him as a brother. Well, here I am, learning to be generous. Chloe, in this new life, I will be just as generous as you always wanted. I'll generously give you space to be with Julian, and in the end, I'll generously give you to him entirely. My tone was light and magnanimous, exactly what she had always demanded of me. For some reason, though, she seemed unsettled by it. But with my gentle insistence, she eventually left. I watched her put her coat back on and walk out. Then I turned to the living room window, my eyes fixed on Julian's house across the way. As soon as his lights flickered on, I told the housekeeper to clear the table. Then I walked to the front door and slid the deadbolt into place. One by one, the lights in our house went dark. Meanwhile, Julian's eyes lit up when Chloe arrived at his door. He rushed to greet her, fussing over her and taking her coat. When she saw the table laden with all her favorite spicy foods, she felt a prickle of unease. She tried to ask him about it, but he skillfully deflected her questions with a constant stream of chatter. The dinner lasted much longer than usual. When she finally left, under Julian's lingering gaze, and returned home, she found our house completely dark. Frowning, she knocked and called my name several times, but there was only silence from within. When she tried the doorknob, she discovered it was deadbolt from the inside. What was going on? She pushed and knocked for what felt like an eternity, but the house remained silent and still. With nowhere else to go, she had no choice but to return to Julian's and explain her embarrassing situation. Hearing that I had actually deadbolted the door, Julian's heart began to race. He fought to keep a smile from his face, feigning concern. Don't worry about it, Chloe. If that's the case, you can just stay here for the night. Chloe rubbed her temples, her voice cool. Thank you for the trouble tonight. I'll sleep on the couch. I'm not going anywhere else. Early the next morning, I opened my bedroom door and saw her sitting on the sofa downstairs. Her coat was still damp with morning dew. She must have just gotten home. I walked down the stairs, my face a mask of indifference. Hearing my footsteps, she looked up. Why did you lock the door last night? I sat down at the table and began to eat my oatmeal. There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood lately, I said casually. I've just gotten into the habit of deadbolting the door. I forgot you were at Julian's. Chloe seemed to accept this and didn't press the issue. She pulled a ticket from her pocket, one her security detail had picked up for her, and placed it on the table in front of me. I know I haven't spent much time with you. I'll have a car pick you up when I'm finished with work, and we can go see a movie this afternoon. I didn't touch the ticket. After breakfast, Chloe changed her clothes and left for work. Only when I heard her car fade into the distance did I finally pick it up. In 5 years of marriage in our last life, she never once sat through an entire movie with me. She always had to leave early for something involving Julian. I had no desire to try again, but the ticket shouldn't go to waste. With that thought, I walked over to Julian's house. Seeing the smug look he couldn't quite hide, I said flatly, "Do you believe me now?" Julian was still skeptical, but after last night's success, he wasn't about to pass up another opportunity, regardless of my true motives. He nodded and handed me a roll of cash. I pocketed the money with a slight smile and pulled the movie ticket from my pocket. This is for the movie this afternoon. You go with her. Make sure you dress well. Try to seal the deal today. Then I turned and left. That afternoon, instead of going to the theater, I took a nap and watered my plants. It was a perfectly relaxing day. As darkness fell, I was folding the newspaper on my lap, ready to head upstairs, when Chloe walked in. A frown creased her forehead, a clear sign of her displeasure. "Why didn't you show up for the movie today?" My hands stilled on the newspaper. I wasn't feeling well. Hearing this, Chloe reached out and placed her hand on my forehead. "Should we go to the hospital?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I shook my head. "There's no need." Just then, the shrill ring of the telephone shattered the quiet. I started to get up, but Chloe answered it first. I was standing close enough to hear the voice on the other end clearly. When I heard the words "County Clerk's Office," my hand tightened on the newspaper, and I held my breath. After what felt like an eternity, she hung up and turned to me. "That was the clerk's office. They said some of our paperwork is missing, but they weren't specific." "What were you doing there anyway?" I let out a silent sigh of relief, keeping my expression neutral. "You know how rushed our wedding was. They must be missing some of the initial forms. I'll take care of it." Thankfully, Chloe just grunted in acknowledgement and went to wash up. A few minutes later, she came out, remembering something. She pulled an invitation from her pocket. "Oh right, Mr. Davis from the office is having a birthday party the day after tomorrow. You're coming with me." It was an invitation I couldn't refuse, so I simply nodded. The party was in full swing, with couples gliding across the floor to the music of an accordion. Chloe started to ask me to dance, but I shook my head. "I'm still not feeling 100%. Why don't you ask Julian? He looks a little lonely over there by himself." As the music swelled again, Chloe saw my reluctance and had no choice but to walk over and take Julian's hand. He was beaming, while her face was a mask of cool indifference. The unlikely pair began to dance, his arm around her waist. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Isn't Chloe married? Why is she dancing with another man? It's hardly appropriate. And that Julian fellow knows she's married. Look at that smile on his face. He has no shame." As her actual husband, I watched from a distance, my face impassive, my mind drifting back. In our last life, every time we were about to dance, Julian would cut in, and she would always choose him. I could still hear her mantra. "Julian is all alone in the world. I have to look after him. You need to be more generous." Now I was giving her exactly what she always wanted, so why did she look so unhappy about it? With so many guests, the toasts began to flow freely. On such a festive occasion, even Chloe, who rarely drank, couldn't refuse. After several shots of liquor, even her formidable composure began to waver, and she stumbled slightly. Chloe was clearly drunk. She pressed her slender fingers to her temples and mumbled my name. But unlike in the past, I didn't rush to her side. Instead, I caught Julian's eye and gave him a slight nod. He immediately hurried over, a wide smile on his face, and took her arm. "Chloe, let me help you." The three of us ended up in the same car. I considerately took the front passenger seat, leaving the entire back for the two of them. Julian eagerly helped a dizzy Chloe into the car. Though her head was spinning, she could tell something was off. It wasn't her imagination. I really had changed lately, and this new version of me made her deeply uneasy. She was about to speak when a loud bang jolted her back to sobriety. The car had broken down, nearly causing an accident. Instantly alert, Chloe's first reaction was to check on Julian. Seeing he was unharmed, she breathed a sigh of relief. But as she looked up, her gaze met mine in the rearview mirror. She opened her mouth to speak, but I had already looked away. As night fell, the rain began to pour. We stood under an umbrella on the side of the road, hoping to flag down a ride. A biting wind swept past, and I shivered. Seeing this, Chloe immediately started to take off her jacket to give to me. But just then, Julian let out a series of loud sneezes. Her hand, holding the jacket, froze in midair. Seeing her hesitation, I gave a sarcastic smile. "He looks like he needs it more than I do," I said, my voice dripping with that generosity she loved so much. "You should give it to him." The jacket, still carrying her warmth, ended up on Julian's shoulders. A faint blush crept up his ears. Just then, a car horn blared. It was Mr. Davis, who rolled down his window to see what was wrong. I urged everyone to get in, but there was an awkward problem. He only had 2 empty seats. This time, Chloe didn't hesitate. "Ethan, you and Julian go first," she said, but Julian tugged on her sleeve like a child. "Chloe, you come with me."
"I'm scared."
Scared of a car ride? He couldn't even come up with a believable excuse. I scoffed internally but kept my face neutral. I turned to Chloe and waved them on. "If that's the case, you two go ahead. You've had too much to drink anyway. You shouldn't be out in this rain." Before Chloe could protest, I pushed both of them toward the car. As I watched it drive away, I turned my attention back to the road and flagged down another vehicle. My destination wasn't home, it was the county clerk's office. The next day, I had just reached our front door when a figure rushed out to meet me. I looked up, it was Chloe. "Why didn't you come home last night? Where were you?" "The rain was too heavy," I said calmly. "I stayed over at a friend's place." The truth was, finishing the paperwork at the clerk's office had taken hours, and by the time I was done, public transport had stopped running. I just found a cheap motel for the night. She looked me over from head to toe, and only after confirming I was all right did she seem to relax. She stepped aside to let me in. "My parents are here." My hand, halfway through taking off my coat, froze. I looked into the living room and saw them immediately. Hearing us, Chloe's parents came over. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, her mother took my arm and led me to the sofa, asking about my health. Ever since Chloe and I got married, her parents had made a habit of visiting. They didn't come to check on us or lay down rules. They came for one reason, to pressure us into having a baby. But a child isn't something you can just conjure up on demand. I glanced at Chloe. Her expression was unreadable as she watched us, but I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. She wanted a child, too. In my last life, I would have wanted nothing more than to have children with her, little versions of ourselves. But this time, the thought held no appeal. When I remained silent, her mother turned to Chloe. "So, are you two going to have a baby or not?" Chloe snapped out of her thoughts and looked at me, my eyes fixed on the floor. Mistaking my silence for shyness, she smiled slightly. "Of course we want to, but you can't rush these things. We're letting nature take its course." Seeing that neither of us was opposed to the idea, her parents exchanged a knowing glance. They had a plan. At dinner that night, her mother brought out a special soup she had prepared, smiling as she served a bowl to each of us. Under her intense, expectant gaze, I had no choice but to drink it all down. Her parents didn't linger after dinner. They waved goodbye and left. Chloe and I went to our room to sleep, but soon after I lay down, a strange heat began to spread through my body. The room felt suffocatingly hot, and I found myself pulling at my shirt. I glanced over and saw Chloe, her face flushed, doing the same. Our eyes met, and in that instant we both knew. Her parents' visit, their talk of babies. There was something in that soup. I started to get up, but she moved faster, leaning over me, her lips finding mine as she pushed me back down onto the bed. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice husky. "Besides, it's been a while since we've been intimate." She cupped my face in one hand, her breathing ragged as her kisses grew more intense. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, a steady drumming against the window pane, blurring the glass into a watery curtain. A single lamp cast a dim, flickering light on our two entangled forms. Just as her hand reached for my belt, I shoved her off me. Stunned by my rejection, Chloe stared at me in disbelief. Connecting it to my recent coldness and distance, her voice trembled as she asked, "What's wrong?" I dug my fingernails into my palm to ground myself and sat up. "Nothing. You should go take a shower." We were both particular about cleanliness, so she didn't question the request. Fighting the heat rising within her, she got up and headed for the bathroom. The moment the bathroom door closed, I chugged a glass of water, then scrambled out my bedroom window. I crept over to Julian's house and tapped on his window. "Get to her room now. She's been drugged. This is your best chance. Don't waste it." Without waiting for his reaction, I disappeared back into the night. Meanwhile, Chloe emerged from the bathroom, toweling her hair. The lamp was now off, and in the darkness, she could just make out a figure lying on the bed. Suspecting nothing, she walked over and climbed on top of him, pressing him into the mattress. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together, and began covering his neck with soft kisses, her other hand growing bolder. Julian, caught completely off guard, couldn't believe he'd been discovered. His face went pale, and he stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "Chloe, I..." The next second, a grunt of pain escaped his lips. He watched in shock as I lowered the wooden rod I was holding. I frowned at him. "Are you going to leave, or not?" That snapped him out of it. He scrambled for his clothes and fled the room. The next morning, Chloe came downstairs rubbing the back of her neck, a confused look on her face. "What happened last night? Was Julian in my room?" I took the last bite of my breakfast. "You went to sleep right after your shower last night," I said, turning the question back on her. "Why would anyone have been in our room?" Though she felt a lingering sense of unease, her memory of the night was hazy, so she let it drop. After all, why would I ever let Julian into our bedroom in the middle of the night? She had no idea this was all my design, another step in my plan to push her away. Chloe's work became incredibly demanding after that, and I couldn't find an opportunity to push her and Julian together. Then, she suddenly received her new assignment, a transfer to Washington, D.C. The catch was, she could only bring one dependent with her. She stared at the transfer orders, hesitating. In the past, she would have chosen me without a second thought. But now there was Julian. She remembered the promise she'd made to his dying sister, to always look after him. The paper in her hand crumpled as her grip tightened. She finally came home and broke the news to me, her voice strained. I'm being transferred to D.C. The department is offering a job at a news station for my accompanying family member as part of the package, but I can only bring one person. Her voice trailed off, but I knew exactly what was coming next. My fists clenched at my sides, and just as I expected, she continued. Julian just lost his sister, and he's all alone. I was thinking, I should take him to DC first. And that job, would you mind letting him have it? I promise, as soon as I'm settled, I'll come back for you. I was her husband, her family. Why should I give up my future for an outsider? Even if his sister had saved her life, there were other ways to repay that debt. Why did it have to be at my expense? In my last life, I argued with her for days, but she took Julian to DC anyway, leaving me behind to wait for years. Alone and abandoned, I became an easy target for everyone's pity and scorn. And Julian twisted the knife, sending me letters filled with details of how Chloe doted on him, even including photos of them at the movies, his arm draped casually around her shoulder. I think I cried all the tears I had in me during those years. Now, faced with the exact same choice, she had chosen Julian again. I looked at her, every word she spoke a careful calculation for another man's future, with no thought for my own. But this time, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just looked at her calmly and said, "Fine, I agree." My quick agreement seemed to stun her. She couldn't hide the shock in her eyes. She searched my face, looking for any sign that I was lying or hiding my anger. But all she found was a stranger. She realized that somewhere along the way, I had changed. The man whose world revolved around her was gone. Now, nothing she did seemed to affect me at all. A strange wave of irritation washed over her. You're just agreeing that easily? I met her gaze. What else am I supposed to do? Isn't this what you wanted? If I threw a fit and refused, would you have changed your mind? My words left her speechless. The answer was obviously no. She had already made her decision the moment the transfer came through. Nothing I could have said or done would have stopped her. A look of guilt crossed her face as she took my hand. Ethan, I know this is hard. I'll make it up to you in the future, I promise. My expression remained placid, but inside, I was laughing. A future? We didn't have a future. Because the transfer was so sudden, the residents of the compound threw a farewell party for Chloe. I sat quietly in a corner, watching her and Julian as they were surrounded by well-wishers. Glass after glass of wine left her cheeks flushed and his eyes glazed over. As the toasts continued, Julian, unable to stand steady, leaned heavily against her. Perhaps sensing my eyes on them, she quickly pushed him away and gestured for one of her security guards to help him to a sofa. Just as Chloe started walking toward me, a low rumble shook the building. A crack shot up the wall from the floor to the ceiling as the ground itself seemed to roar. The structure groaned and swayed, fissures spiderwebbing across the walls. A wave of dizziness and panic washed over the room. Faces went pale, and the air filled with screams. Chloe, who had been walking toward me, quickened her pace. But then, a cry came from behind her. Chloe! It was Julian. She froze, and in that single moment of hesitation, the entire building came crashing down, burying us all. I don't know how much time passed before I opened my eyes again. My body was pinned beneath a heavy support beam. In the suffocating darkness, I could hear faint cries and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I tried to scream for help, but terror had stolen my voice. More time passed. Then, suddenly, the sound of a power drill whined from above, followed by a shout. "We've got someone! Over here!" The rubble above me was cleared away, and a blinding light forced me to shut my eyes. But when the rescuer saw the full scene, he hesitated. I wasn't the only one trapped. A few feet away, Julian was pinned under the debris as well. One of the rescuers turned to Chloe. "It's your husband, but Julian is trapped too. This whole structure is unstable. Another aftershock could bring it all down. We have to choose who to get out first." Chloe looked at me, my face pale beneath the rubble, and her heart clenched. "Of course you save." But before she could finish, Julian, who had just regained consciousness, began to scream. "Chloe, save me first, please. I'm so scared. Chloe, don't leave me here." At that exact moment, an aftershock hit, and a fresh shower of dust and debris rained down on us. "You need to make a choice now," a rescuer yelled. "If you wait any longer, we could lose them both." Julian's voice rose to a desperate shriek. "You promised my sister. You promised you'd take care of me." Hearing his desperate plea, a grim resolve settled over Chloe's face. "Save Julian first," she commanded. A wave of shock passed over the faces of the rescue crew. No one could believe she would choose to save an outsider over her own husband. My own eyes flew open in disbelief. She had chosen him over me countless times before, but now, in a life-or-death situation, she was still choosing him? My voice trembled as I whispered her name. "Chloe!" But my voice was lost in Julian's wails. "Chloe, it hurts. It hurts so much. Please, save me." Chloe didn't hesitate any longer. She directed the rescuers to focus on Julian. The screech of a saw cut through the air, sending dust and debris flying. The vibrations sent clouds of choking dust cascading down on me. Then another aftershock hit. My body shook violently, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I was hopelessly trapped. Gritting her teeth, Chloe helped the crew cut through the last piece of debris and pull Julian free. With a deafening roar, the section of rubble above me gave way. The small pocket of space I had was gone, and I was plunged back into total darkness. "Ethan," the last thing I saw before I blacked out was the look of pure terror on her face. My entire body was a symphony of pain. I couldn't move. With great effort, I forced my eyes open to the sight of a sterile, white ceiling. "Ethan, you're awake?" A voice, filled with relief, came from beside me. I turned my head. It was Chloe. Her hair was a mess, and she looked as if she hadn't slept in days. But all I could see when I looked at her was the moment she chose to save Julian and leave me to die. I turned away and closed my eyes again. The room fell silent once more. Chloe looked at me, her fists clenching and unclenching at her sides. She knew nothing she could say would get through to me right now. After a long moment, she finally whispered, "You should get some rest," and left. As the door clicked shut, a single tear escaped and soaked into the pillowcase. I quickly wiped it away. For the next few days, Chloe split her time between my room and Julian's. Guilt, I suppose, kept her by my side more often than not. My heart had turned to ash. I couldn't have cared less what she did. Julian, however, was growing impatient. He stormed into my room one afternoon when Chloe was out. "Ethan, what the hell is your game? You create all these opportunities for us, and then you cling to her like this. Are you just messing with me?" I looked at his angry, petulant face and said nothing for a long time. Then, I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce certificate that had just been finalized. "I stopped loving her a long time ago, and I'm not playing with you. The divorce is final." Julian's eyes went wide with shock. He'd thought it was all just talk, a way to get money from him. He never imagined I'd actually go through with it. Just then, the door opened, and Chloe walked in. Her eyes immediately locked onto the document in my hand. "What is that?" She rushed forward to see, but Julian quickly stood up, blocking her path. "Chloe, where have you been? I was just looking for you. I need to talk to you about something." He steered her out of the room by her sleeve, and as the door closed behind them, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. On the day I was discharged, Julian gave me my final payment. "Ethan, I don't know why you really did all this," he said, "but I expect you to keep your promise. Disappear from our lives for good." I deposited all the money I'd gotten from him and went home to pack. When Chloe got home, she stopped short, stunned by the sight of my clothes spread all over the bedroom. "What are you doing with all this?" I didn't look at her, just continued packing. "The seasons are changing," I said calmly. "Just doing some organizing." She watched me, her hand on the doorknob tightening into a fist. A strange panic began to bloom in her chest. Thinking back on all my strange behavior recently, she rushed forward and grabbed my arm. "Stop packing. We can buy you all new things when we get to DC." I frowned, confused by her words. She gripped my hand tighter, her voice edged with desperation. "Ethan, I spoke with my superiors. They made an exception. I can bring 2 dependents. We can all go to DC together, you and Julian and me. The job at the news station, it still has to go to Julian. I know you're angry that I didn't save you first during the collapse, but I had no choice. I promised his sister I would look after him. I can't break a promise. Please, can you just stop being angry with me?" I looked at her, my face a calm mask, my heart filled with a cold, bitter amusement. Did she really think this was about me being angry? As if I even had the right to be angry anymore. In my last life, after this same disaster, she had also rushed to Julian's side first. She spent 2 weeks with him at the hospital before she even thought to call and check on me. And during that time, Julian had visited me, just to taunt me with stories of how Chloe stayed by his bedside day and night, tending to his every need. The injustice of it all washed over me again. I had been seriously injured, yet my wife was coddling another man with minor scrapes. I went through admission, surgery, and recovery completely alone. While I cried myself to sleep from the pain, my wife was holding a vigil at another man's bedside. My sense of betrayal festered into a deep, burning rage. I called her and screamed all my pain and anger into the phone. She listened in silence. When I was finally spent, all she said was, "I've told you there's nothing going on with Julian. If you refuse to believe me, there's nothing more I can do." A chill went through me that had nothing to do with my injuries. I don't remember the rest of the conversation. Shortly after I was discharged, she left for DC with Julian. Now that I was calm and generous, showing no signs of protest, she was suddenly desperate to take me with her. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I quickly masked my expression, but not before she saw it. A real panic entered her eyes then, as if she was truly about to lose something precious. She threw her arms around me. "Ethan, please, let's go together." I knew I couldn't refuse. It would make her suspicious. In her mind, I was still the man who couldn't live without her. So I gave a small nod. "Okay, we'll go together." She let out a huge sigh of relief, so she didn't hear the words I added under my breath. "We'll travel together, but we're not going to the same destination. Chloe, you and I have been on different paths for a very long time." On the day we left, the smile vanished from Julian's face when he saw me get into the car behind them. I didn't even glance in his direction as I stowed my suitcase and took my seat. On the train, Julian was his usual pathetic self. He claimed his ankle was sprained and needed Chloe to help him board. Then he was cold and needed to sit closer to her for warmth. Then he was sleepy and wanted to rest his head in her lap. Chloe tried to refuse, glancing at me for support, but I just kept my eyes closed. Eventually, she gave in to his every whim. Her solicitousness was so obvious that another passenger remarked, "You're a lucky man, young fellow. You've got yourself a wonderful wife there." The comment made Julian blush, and he leaned even closer to Chloe. But she shifted away, her expression turning cold. "You've misunderstood," she said to the passenger. "We're not in that kind of relationship." Her words made Julian's face fall, but the passenger just chuckled, assuming she was being modest. "Oh, don't be shy, dear. It's obvious you two are close. If you're not a couple, why are you sitting practically in his lap?" At that, Chloe immediately stood up and moved to the seat next to me. "This is my husband," she stated firmly. "He is just a friend." The passenger's eyes darted between the three of us. Then they wisely decided to drop the subject and turned to look out the window. An awkward silence filled the car. Julian stared resentfully at Chloe, who now sat beside me with her eyes closed. The train swayed along the tracks, the dim lights casting shifting shadows across my face. I opened my eyes with a frown, just as my head bumped against the suitcase I'd placed on the seat beside me. My quiet grunt of pain startled Chloe awake. She opened her eyes and immediately reached out to rub the spot on my forehead. Her eyes fell on the suitcase. "Why do you have your bag here? Let me put it up on the rack for you." She started to get up, but I placed a hand on the bag, stopping her. "Don't bother. It's fine here." Seeing the firm refusal in my expression, she didn't press the issue. When the train made a stop, Chloe got up to use the restroom. Julian, who had been pretending to sleep, sat up and glared at me. "Ethan, what is this? I thought you said you were done with her. Why are you here?" "I knew you were just playing me for a fool." He was furious, but I remained perfectly calm, not even bothering to open my eyes. "You'll get what you want." Julian frowned, about to demand what I meant, when a shout erupted from the other end of the car. "Thief! Stop him! Don't let him get away!" We both turned to see a menacing man with a knife running down the aisle. Several brave passengers tried to stop him, but in his panic, the thief lunged for the nearest person to use as a hostage. "Look out!" Chloe, just returning from the restroom, saw what was happening and lunged toward the thief. He was already upon us, knife in hand. In that split second, she could only save one of us. She yanked a terrified, pale Julian out of the way. But when she turned to grab me, she was too late. The thief grabbed me, and in the chaos, his knife sliced deeply into my arm. "He's been stabbed." The sight of blood sent a fresh wave of panic and screams through the car. Chloe kicked the man squarely in the chest as transit police swarmed in and subdued him. "Oh, son, your arm!" a passenger cried, rushing over and tearing a strip from her shirt to press against the wound. Chloe hurried to my side, her face a mask of panic. "Ethan," whatever she was about to say died on her lips. Blood was pouring from my arm, but my gaze was perfectly calm, almost unnervingly so. For the rest of the night, we sat across the aisle from each other. She rebandaged my arm, her voice trembling with residual fear as she spoke. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. Back there I know, I cut her off. You don't have to say it." Chloe looked up, her eyes swimming with guilt. Seeing that I wouldn't listen, she let out a long sigh. Ethan, when we get to DC, things will be better. We'll have a good life, I promise. I'll buy you anything you want. I just stared at her, silent. We were divorced. How could we possibly have a good life together? The only good life she was planning was with Julian, not with me. I closed my eyes, exhausted. Seeing my fatigue, she stopped talking and gently draped a blanket over me. She figured there would be plenty of time to talk later. With that thought, she closed her own eyes, weary to her bones. Late that night, when the entire car was asleep, I quietly picked up my suitcase. Then, I gently tucked the folded divorce certificate into Chloe's sleeping hand. I looked down at her sleeping face, a face I knew so well. I remembered it filled with joy when I proposed, tears streaming down her cheeks like a child's. I remembered it flushed and nervous on our wedding night, and I remembered it turning cold and hard, her voice laced with accusation, whenever we fought about Julian. All those memories swirled together, coalescing into the face before me now. A face I had loved for 5 years. A face I would never see again. The train's whistle blew, signaling an upcoming stop. Chloe stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. Without a backward glance, I picked up my suitcase and stepped off the train. The wheels rumbled against the platform as I walked away. In the opposite direction the train was headed, and I never looked back. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at Union Station in Washington, D.C. Please gather your belongings and exit the train in an orderly fashion. The conductor's voice echoed through the car, rousing the sleeping passengers. Groggy with sleep, Chloe rubbed her eyes. Something slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor. She bent down to retrieve it, and the moment her eyes focused on the object, she was instantly shockingly awake. Her mind went completely blank. Her hand trembled as she reached for the paper on the floor. It took her several tries to pick it up. She unfolded it. Inside was her official photo, half of it covered by the embossed seal of the court. A divorce certificate. She shot upright and looked at my seat. It was empty. My suitcase was gone. A wave of pure panic washed over her. She started calling my name, her voice rising with each call, earning confused stares from the other passengers. But I was nowhere to be seen. She scrambled off the train and scanned the platform, desperately searching for me, but I was gone. A hot surge of anger rose in her chest, and she clutched the divorce certificate so tightly it threatened to tear. To divorce her without her consent meant filing a unilateral petition, and that required filing a month in advance, which meant a month ago. But what had she done? What had she done that was so wrong I would divorce her without even telling her? Chloe stared at the empty platform, biting her lips so hard she could taste blood. Her eyes filled with a profound and desolate confusion. Julian stepped off the train, and a flicker of triumph lit his eyes when he saw the paper in her hand. He grabbed her arm, all pretense gone. Is that it? The divorce papers? Chloe, now that Ethan is gone. Before he could finish, Chloe shoved him away. For the first time, she looked at him with a dead serious expression, all traces of her former affection gone. Even her tone changed. My responsibility to you ends here, Julian. Julian froze, a chill seeping into his bones. What did you just say? In the past, she would have rushed to comfort him. Now, she just looked at him with cold detachment. You know, the only reason I've taken care of you is because I promised your sister I would. I fulfilled that promise. I brought you to DC, and I've arranged a stable job for you. From this point forward, we have nothing to do with each other. Her words grew colder with each syllable, and Julian's face went pale, not with anger, but with fear. He had worked so hard to secure his position with this powerful woman. He couldn't let her go. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I won't leave you. Chloe, you promised my sister. You have to take care of me forever. You can't just abandon me. Chloe shoved him off, her eyes like ice. Don't be so greedy, Julian. Greedy? Are you telling me that in all these years you haven't felt a single thing for me? Are you really just going to let me go? He remembered it all so clearly. The way she held him and whispered comforts the day his sister died. The way she gripped his hand at the dance. The way she shielded him with her own body during the car accident and the building collapse. She might fool others, but she couldn't fool him. It was impossible that she didn't love him. Chloe's grip on the divorce certificate tightened, the sharp corner digging into her palm, the pain a clarifying sting. How am I supposed to face your sister after all this? Julian shook his head frantically. If you don't love me, then why were you always so good to me? You could have sent anyone to help me, but you always came yourself. Why? Then his eyes narrowed, a desperate gambit forming. Besides, it's too late to get rid of me. We've already slept together. Chloe stared at him, her shock quickly turning to a cold fury. She advanced on him, each step slow and deliberate. Julian's hands trembled behind his back, but he met her gaze. That night, after you drank that soup, it was me in your bed. Her advance halted. She remembered that night. She remembered my flimsy excuse. He had sent another man to his wife's bed. The rage of betrayal consumed her. But before she could speak, a driver from her security detail ran up. "Ma'am, your car is this way." Chloe suppressed her fury. Without a single glance at Julian, she gave an order to the driver. "Take him back to the residence. And that job at the news station? Cancel it." Julian let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and sank to the ground. He stared at the pavement, knowing he had bought himself some time. But what would happen next? Resentment churned in his gut. This was all Ethan's fault. If he hadn't disappeared so suddenly, Julian never would have been forced to take such a desperate measure. In an office in D.C., Chloe's superior finished his briefing. Remembering her marital status, he added, "And how is Ethan? He must be having a hard time adjusting to the city. Make sure you take good care of him." Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her boss, a man who had seen it all, smiled knowingly. "A little spat with the husband?" "Not a spat," she said quietly. "We're divorced." The smile vanished from his face. After she explained the situation, his voice was laced with disappointment. "What is wrong with you, Chloe? You're one of the sharpest people I know when it comes to work, but you're a complete fool in your personal life. Yes, the man's sister saved your life, and yes, you had a duty to her brother. But how could you not see the line you were crossing?" Not wanting to belabor the point, he waved a dismissive hand, signaling the meeting was over. On the drive home, one of her aides gave her a report. They had looked into my departure. All they could find was a bus ticket heading south, towards Georgia, but with no final destination. In this day and age, without a clear trail, finding one person in the entire country was like finding a needle in a haystack. The aide continued. They had taken Julian for a medical examination, where he admitted that nothing had actually happened between them that night. But given his status as the dependent of a fallen colleague, they couldn't just throw him out on the street. For now, he would have to remain at her residence. Chloe listened, her expression growing darker with every word. Finally, she just closed her eyes, defeated. The rest of the ride was silent. As she approached her front door, she could hear shouting from inside. At least this house was more private than the old complex. No matter how loud Julian screamed, there were no nosy neighbors to come running. She walked into the living room with a deep frown. Julian was clinging to the sofa, refusing to be moved by her security staff. When he saw her, he lunged, trying to embrace her, but she sidestepped him easily. "Julian, I have made myself perfectly clear. Please leave now." "Chloe, if you didn't love me, you shouldn't have been so good to me. You shouldn't have abandoned your husband for me time and time again. I've given you my whole heart. What am I supposed to do now? After all this time, my reputation is ruined because of you. You have to take responsibility for me." All his previous coyness was gone. He just stared at her, his eyes possessing a dark, obsessive quality that sent a shiver down her spine. "My support for you has always been public and transparent. My conscience is clear. If you try to make this a scandal, you will be the only one who gets hurt." Julian stopped shouting. For the first time, he truly saw the woman in front of him. Cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. That was the real Chloe. "I will give you enough money to start a life here in D.C. After that, we are finished." Without another look at the broken man on the floor, she turned and closed her bedroom door behind her. A pathetic whimper escaped his lips. I felt a wave of disorientation. After getting off that first train, I had boarded the next one without even looking at the destination. I never would have guessed it would take me all the way to Savannah, Georgia. A window opened in a historic house by a cobblestone street, and the gentle notes of a guitar drifted out, a woman singing a soft, unfamiliar melody. In the warm, humid air, a tour boat drifted lazily down the river. A light drizzle began to fall. I shielded my head with my hand and hurried with my suitcase toward the shelter of an awning. The rain came down harder, pattering against the historic flagstones. As I pressed back against a storefront to stay dry, I bumped into someone behind me. "Sorry," I said, turning around, and found myself lost in the depths of her eyes. Her gaze was soft, her profile exquisite, with a delicate nose and perfectly shaped lips. She was wearing a simple, elegant silk dress, but it was her hands that caught my attention, long, graceful, and strong. A gentle smile played on her lips. "It's no problem. Come on in out of the rain." The air in her small tea shop was fragrant. After she kindly lent me a dry shirt, I sat across from her, carefully taking the cup of hot tea she offered. "Thank you, Olivia. Olivia smiled. Are you here in Savannah all by yourself? I had no desire to talk about my past. The memories were anything but pleasant. She seemed to sense this and tactfully changed the subject, asking what my plans were for the future. Julian had given me over $5,000, but that money wouldn't last forever. I needed to find a job, but after 5 years of being a kept husband, my old skills as a tailor were rusty. What else could I do? She must have seen the uncertainty in my eyes. She tapped her finger on the table, a thoughtful expression on her face. A friend of mine is looking to sell his tailor shop. If you're interested, we could go take a look once the rain stops. My despair was instantly replaced by a surge of hope. After the rain subsided, Olivia closed her shop and led me down the cobblestone streets, telling me about the town. It's a small town, but the people are good. There are plenty of tourist shops, but very few tailors. My friend hates to sell his place, but he has to move for family. The mention of moving for family made me think of DC. Chloe and Julian were probably there by now. With me out of the picture, I imagined their relationship was progressing smoothly. After a short walk, we arrived at a charming 2-story building. Olivia's friend gave me a tour and explained the business. We got along well, and with Olivia putting in a good word for me, we quickly agreed on a price. The next week was a blur of activity. I finalized the deed, then went around to all the local suppliers to introduce myself. Since my skills were rusty, I apprenticed myself to an old master tailor in town. I was an eager student and he was a patient teacher. Within a month, I was back in form. I made a new shirt for myself, and as a special thank you to Olivia, I made her a new dress. Her eyes widened in surprise when I presented it to her, a smile quickly spreading across her face. For me, I nodded, a little embarrassed. After setting up the shop and buying all the initial supplies, my funds were running low. A handmade gift felt like the most sincere way to thank her. I'd also brought a box of pastries from a famous bakery at the edge of town, the sweet smell wafting through the wax paper. I love it, she said. Thank you. I'm glad you like it, I said, breathing a sigh of relief. When I first opened, the locals were hesitant. A new tailor was a risk. No one wanted to be seen in a poorly made garment. But after a few days, my little shop was bustling. Not only was my workmanship excellent and my designs modern, but I had a friendly manner that quickly won over the townspeople. One evening, as I was closing up after the last customer, a woman stormed up to the shop. She threw a dress on the ground and started shouting, "Everyone, come and see. This tailor shop is a ripoff. I paid good money for this dress, and the fabric is so cheap it tore before I could even wear it." It was that time in the evening when people were out for a stroll after dinner, and a crowd quickly gathered. When they saw it was me she was yelling at, they started whispering amongst themselves. "That can't be right. The clothes Ethan made for me are perfect. I've never had a problem with his work." As the crowd's skepticism grew, the woman's face soured, but she doubled down. "So you're all going to take his side against me? Why would I lie about this? The fabric is shoddy, and I want a refund." Then, she called a few other women out from the crowd, each holding a similarly damaged garment. I narrowed my eyes. I might be new here, but I wasn't an idiot. This was clearly a setup. I couldn't possibly have made that many dresses in the last month, and it was awfully convenient that all the damaged items belonged to this specific group of women. I scanned the crowd and my eyes landed on a man trying to shrink into the shadows. It was the owner of the only other tailor shop in town. Just as I was about to confront him, a gentle hand stopped me. I turned to see Olivia shaking her head. She stepped forward, picked up the dress from the ground, and examined it closely. "You're sure this dress was made here?" she asked the woman. The woman, intimidated by Olivia's calm authority, took a step back but held her ground. "Of course I'm sure. No one else in town uses this fabric or this design. Who else could have made it? This style isn't exclusive, and you can buy this fabric anywhere," Olivia said smoothly. She turned the dress inside out, pointing to a small detail in the seam. "Anyone who is a customer here knows that Ethan stitches his initials into the lining of every garment he makes as a mark of authenticity. Your tag is not only in the wrong place, but the stitching is all wrong." The woman's face went white, and she began to stammer incoherently. The crowd, now certain of the truth, turned on her. Under the pressure of their accusations, she quickly confessed, naming the owner of the rival tailor shop as the one who had put her up to it. Apparently, his business had always been slow. When the previous shop closed, he thought his luck had finally turned. But then I arrived and opened a more successful shop right next door, so he resorted to sabotage. Now, not only had his plan failed, but he was also facing criminal charges. The crowd cheered as the police led the man away. The women who had accused me had long since vanished into the night, but my expression remained grim, and Olivia looked at me with concern. The incident was a stark reminder. Success breeds jealousy. Today it was a clumsy frame-up, but next time the methods could be more sophisticated. Even with authentic garments, what was to stop someone from damaging them intentionally after leaving my shop? I turned and rested my hand on the old wooden door of my shop, a wave of despair washing over me. I had been so desperate to build a new life here, to find a way to stand on my own 2 feet. But to face this kind of attack so soon after opening, for a moment I wondered if it was even worth it to continue. A hand landed gently on my shoulder. It was Olivia. "It's going to be okay," she said softly. "The truth always comes out. I've been through something similar myself." She told me how, when she first opened her shop, a customer accused her of selling them inferior tea. She had been terrified, but she calmed down, called the authorities, and an investigation revealed that one of the customer's own employees had swapped the high-quality tea for a cheaper blend and pocketed the difference. The experience taught her to be prepared for anything. "We just need to come up with a better system," she said, her voice full of confidence. I closed the shop for a week, and Olivia and I sat down and brainstormed solutions. When I reopened, business was better than ever. Seeing me swamped, Olivia recommended 2 sharp, quick-fingered young women to help as apprentices. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. But my relief was short-lived. Olivia came to me with news. She finally told me the truth about who she was. She wasn't just a tea shop owner. She was the granddaughter of a very high-ranking official in Washington, D.C. She had come to Savannah to recover from a long illness. Now that she was healthy again, she had to go home. A pang of loss, sharp and unexpected, went through me. She was the first person I'd met in this town, the one who had helped me rebuild my life from nothing. We had just started to become real friends. Seeing the look on my face, she seemed on the verge of suggesting I come with her to D.C. But then she must have remembered how I always avoided talking about that city, as if it held some painful memory for me. She swallowed whatever she was going to say. "It's okay," she said instead. "I'll give you my address. We can write to each other." Hearing that, I pushed down my own disappointment and agreed. The day Olivia left, it was raining, just like the day I had arrived. She gave me the key to her tea shop. "Come by whenever you like," she said. "Keep the place from getting too lonely. Maybe I'll be back someday." But we both knew it was unlikely. As the granddaughter of a powerful man, her life was not her own to decide. I watched her car drive away until it was just a speck in the distance. Then I opened my umbrella and slowly walked back down the cobblestone street to her empty tea shop. Pushing the door open, I felt a wave of emptiness. I had always been so happy here. My eyes drifted to our usual table by the window. I sat down in my spot, but the seat across from me was empty. There was no one there to pour me a cup of tea. With a long sigh, I realized just how much I already missed her. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting her to walk in at any moment. But I waited until nightfall and she never came. Back in Washington, D.C. Since our divorce, Chloe had become a different person, colder and more withdrawn. After she finally threw Julian out for good, he tried to drug her in a desperate act of revenge. With no one left to protect him, he was swiftly arrested. His connections should have earned him a light sentence, but an investigation uncovered a string of other crimes. Combined with Chloe's refusal to intervene, he ended up facing a much harsher punishment than anyone expected. She would come home to a dark, empty house. There was no one waiting for her, no warm meal on the table. Even after months, she still couldn't get used to the silence. On most nights, the housekeeper would hear her arrive and come out to make her a simple bowl of soup. One day, an invitation arrived in the mail. The prestigious Harrison family was throwing a welcome home party for their granddaughter, who had returned to D.C. after a long illness. It was an event she couldn't miss. Her first instinct was to call out for me to arrange a gift. Before she remembered, we were divorced. I was gone. In the end, she had her housekeeper prepare a gift and drove to the Harrison estate alone. The Harrison mansion was ablaze with light. It was the first time Chloe had met their granddaughter. If Chloe's beauty was a cold, sharp diamond, this woman's was a warm, glowing pearl. Her gentle grace captivated every young man in the room. After offering her congratulations and presenting her gift, Chloe found a quiet corner to sit, staring out the window. Her melancholy stillness drew the attention of the hostess, Olivia Harrison. A guest, noticing Olivia's curiosity, explained who Chloe was, telling her the story of her recent divorce and her devoted ex-husband who had mysteriously disappeared. As she listened to the description of this loving, kind, and recently vanished ex-husband, a familiar face flashed in Olivia's mind. "What was his name?" she asked. "I believe it was Ethan." Olivia didn't hear the rest of the conversation. Her mind was filled with the image of me, So that was it. That was the reason I never wanted to talk about Washington, D.C. After the party, her grandfather, Mr. Harrison, called Olivia into his study. He asked about her health and her time in the small town. She answered his questions patiently, and then she took a deep breath. "Grandfather, I've fallen in love with someone." The old man nearly choked on his tea. His granddaughter, who had shown absolutely no interest in men her entire life, was in love? "It's just," Olivia continued, "his situation is a bit complicated." Her grandfather set down his cup and looked at her intently, bracing himself. "He's Chloe's ex-husband." She had expected an explosion, but instead, her grandfather just waved a dismissive hand. "Is that all? Grandfather, you're not angry? He's an ex-husband, not a current one. If you like him, that's all that matters. I won't interfere, but I will give you one piece of advice. The fact that they divorced is almost certainly Chloe's fault. Don't you dare make the same mistakes and hurt that boy." A brilliant smile lit up Olivia's face. "So you approve?" Her grandfather poured himself another cup of tea. "That depends entirely on whether the young man is willing." It was late when Olivia finally left the study. Back in her room, she took out a sheet of stationery and a pen. She sat for a long time thinking, before finally writing a few simple, caring lines. When Olivia's next letter arrived, another gentle rain was falling in Savannah. I propped open the window, letting in the cool breeze and the soft sound of rain on the cobblestones. I sat and read her letter from D.C., a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. It had been nearly 3 months since she'd left. In that time, my life had settled into a routine, working in my shop and spending my evenings sitting in her quiet, empty tea shop. Her letters were my only connection to the world I'd left behind, and through them, I learned what was happening there. She told me how Julian, far from getting that cushy news station job, had ended up in prison. She mentioned how the son of another prominent family had become infatuated with Chloe, only to be swiftly grounded by his parents before he could make a fool of himself. Back home, our marriage had been the envy of everyone. Even the elite in D.C. had heard of us. So when Chloe arrived not with me, but with Julian, it raised a lot of questions. Who leaves their husband behind for a major career move? It didn't take long for the news of our divorce to spread, and combined with Julian's scandalous behavior, Chloe's reputation took a serious hit. People began to whisper, what kind of woman would neglect her own husband to dote on another man? It made me think of my last life. She had also taken only Julian to DC back then, but my bitter, jealous reactions had made me the villain of the story. Everyone called me petty and unreasonable. This time, by simply letting her have her way, by not fighting, the roles had reversed. She was the one being judged. At the end of her letter, Olivia warned me that Chloe hadn't given up. She was still actively searching for me, but I was just one person who had vanished into the vastness of the country. Finding me would be nearly impossible. I folded the letter and stared out at the rain. I had been in Savannah for almost a year and had managed to save a decent amount of money. Chloe might not find me today or tomorrow, but if she kept searching, it was only a matter of time. I knew I couldn't stay here forever. Chloe read the latest report from the private investigator. Still no sign of me. She crumpled the paper in her fist. A year. An entire year had passed since I'd walked out of her life, and she was no closer to finding me. Her initial panic had morphed into rage, which had now curdled into a weary, helpless resignation. She had told everyone from the beginning that her care for Julian was born of duty, a promise to a dying friend. That's why she had prioritized his safety. And what had been her reward? I had divorced her behind her back. In her memory, I had always been the understanding one, the generous one. How could I have been so unreasonable about this one thing? The more she thought about it, the more agitated she became. She took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and dialed her investigator. Keep looking. I don't care what it takes. Find him. The news that Chloe was still looking for me barely registered. All my attention was focused on the person standing in the doorway of my shop. Olivia, what are you doing here? I took a sharp breath as Olivia stepped inside, setting down her suitcase. A warm, gentle light shone in her eyes as she looked at me. I came back to see someone. I wasn't some naive kid. 5 years of marriage had taught me to read between the lines. But after everything I'd been through, the thought of starting a new relationship was terrifying. I tried to deflect, to change the subject, but Olivia grabbed my hand, her gaze direct and serious. Ethan, I can't hide how I feel anymore. After I met you, it's like I can't see anyone else. I know what Chloe did to you, how she treated you. I'm not her. I will never be her. Please, just give me a chance to show you. A blush crept up my neck. Took me a long moment to find my voice. Olivia, you know I've been through a bad marriage. I don't know if I'm ready, if I can ever be ready for a new relationship. Could take a very long time for me to heal. And even then, I can't promise it will end the way you want. The next thing I knew, her arms were around me, holding me tight. She smelled of sandalwood and tea leaves. After a moment of stunned silence, I slowly raised my arms and hugged her back. After we confessed our feelings for each other, life began to change. And on the day we officially got engaged, I found myself on a train, heading back to Washington, D.C. From the day Olivia and I made it official, I knew this day would come. I knew I would have to return to D.C. and face Chloe. Olivia didn't want me to go, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. As her fiancé, I couldn't keep running from my past. So I boarded the train. The occasion was a grand party to celebrate the engagement of Olivia Harrison and her fiancé. Chloe had known Olivia Harrison by reputation, a woman famously immune to the charms of her many suitors. She was intensely curious to meet the man who had finally captured her heart. But when she saw me standing by Olivia's side, her curiosity curdled into a toxic mix of disbelief and rage. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She stared at me, the man she had spent 2 years searching for, the man who had vanished without a trace, now standing before her as another woman's fiancé. Fury propelled her forward, but Olivia stepped smoothly into her path, blocking her way. "Is there a problem?" Olivia asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Your fiancé?" Chloe spat. "That's my husband." Her outburst sent a wave of murmurs through the crowd as they remembered our history. But this time, the gossip was all directed at her. Seeing the ugly, twisted look on her face, I felt an unexpected twinge of something. Pity, perhaps. In my last life, after 5 long years of waiting, she had finally brought me to D.C. I had seen her on a stage with Julian, and in a fit of rage, I had rushed forward to slap him. The memory was so vivid, the crowd pointing and whispering, and Chloe, watching me with a look of pure ice, not lifting a finger to intervene. "Chloe, are you insane?" I said, my voice sharp. "We are divorced. If you're looking for a husband, you should be talking to Julian." The color drained from her face. She stared at me, her expression one of utter shock, as if she couldn't comprehend that the man who once adored her could speak to her with such venom. Seeing that a scene was imminent, Olivia raised her hand to signal security. "Let me talk to her alone," I said, stopping Olivia. I had left too abruptly 2 years ago. There were things that needed to be said. We sat facing each other in the garden. My expression was cold and distant, a perfect mirror of the way she used to look at me. I noticed for the first time how worn she looked, how the past 2 years had taken their toll. But it didn't matter. Our marriage had been fractured from the moment she chose to comfort Julian over me. Every time she left me for him, I was plagued by nightmares. Her vague excuses and Julian's constant taunts were what drove me to despair in my last life. And even in this life, when faced with a choice, she still chose him. She called it responsibility. I called it an excuse to hide her emotional affair. I began to speak, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Chloe, our marriage started to die the day you chose to comfort Julian instead of me. There are a million ways to repay a debt, but you chose the one that sacrificed my future. Every time he needed something, you could have sent a doctor, a professional, someone better equipped to help. But you always had to go yourself. You treated him better than you ever treated me. Do you know what people said? They thought he was your husband. How pathetic is that? If you truly loved me, you would have known it wasn't me in our bed that night. You wouldn't have needed to hear his voice to realize your mistake. And the building collapsed, the train. Your first instinct, your reflex, was to save him, not me. Don't you dare call that responsibility. None of what you did for him was about responsibility." As I finally voiced the pain of 2 lifetimes, tears began to stream down my face. A flicker of pain crossed Chloe's face, and she reached out to wipe them away, but I flinched back. My vision blurred, and I could no longer see her clearly, but my voice was steady as I delivered the final blow. "Chloe, if I had one wish, it would be that I had never, ever met you. If I had never met her, I never would have known such pain. I never would have died such a miserable death." Seeing my tear-streaked face, she felt a crushing pain in her chest, as if her heart was being squeezed in a vice. Her hand gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Ethan, please let me explain," she choked out. "I never had feelings for Julian. I admit, I cared for him, but it was always out of a sense of duty." But I had no patience left to hear her excuses. As I walked away, Chloe started to follow, but a figure shot past her and slapped her hard across the face. It was Olivia, her face contorted with rage. She had known the broad strokes of my story, but she had never imagined the true depths of Chloe's cruelty. She couldn't begin to fathom the pain I must have endured for 5 years. She raised her hand to strike again, but I caught her arm. I shook my head. Let it go. Her grandfather is waiting for us. Without another glance at the woman crumpled on the ground, I turned and walked away. A long time passed before Chloe finally stirred. She wiped a trickle of blood from her lip and stared at it, a bitter smile twisting her mouth. In the past, I would have been frantic if she'd gotten so much as a paper cut. Now, I could watch her bleed and not even blink. After our engagement, Olivia had a ring custom-made for me. As I slipped the perfectly fitting band onto my finger, I was struck by a wave of emotion. I had married Chloe twice in 2 different lives, and both times the ring she gave me hadn't fit. Her excuse was always that she was in too much of a hurry to marry me to worry about details. Perhaps things that come too easily are never truly valued. Perhaps our marriage was doomed long before Julian ever entered the picture. Perhaps he was just the catalyst that hastened the inevitable end. Seeing my somber mood, Olivia spent the next few days showing me her version of DC. We rode bikes through quiet neighborhoods and explored hidden corners of the city, her stories and laughter slowly coaxing a real smile back onto my face. She snuggled against my chest. Once I've tied up all the loose ends here, she whispered, let's go back to Savannah. For good. I stroked her hair, a flicker of worry in my heart. With her family and connections, her future was here in DC. In Savannah, all she had was a little tea shop. She just smiled and touched my cheek, her eyes telling me everything I needed to know. But the peaceful moment was shattered when Olivia's housekeeper came running up to us, out of breath. Mr. Ethan, it's your ex-wife. She's been in a car accident. She's refusing treatment and says she won't let the doctors touch her until she sees you. In the end, I got in the car. On the way to the hospital, the housekeeper filled me in. After our talk in the garden, Chloe hadn't given up. She had been showing up at the Harrison estate every day, trying to see me. The family had been about to have her forcibly removed when she collapsed. They rushed her to the hospital, and when she woke up, she was hysterical, demanding to see me and talking nonsense. A terrible premonition began to form in my mind. Olivia saw the look on my face and put her arm around me. If this is too much, we can turn back. You don't have to see her. I shook my head. It's fine. It's time to end this once and for all. When we arrived at her room, a security guard blocked Olivia's path. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said apologetically. Her orders were clear. Only he is to go in. I gave Olivia's hand a reassuring squeeze, nodded, and stepped inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the woman in the hospital bed turned and scrambled to her feet. Husband. And in that single, possessive word, I knew. Chloe had been reborn, too. She threw her arms around me, sobbing apologies into my chest. She explained that, in our first life, it wasn't until she saw my dead body that she truly understood the magnitude of her mistake. She said her care for Julian had started as a simple duty to a friend, but that duty became a weapon Julian used to hurt me. She had tried to explain, but my rage and pain always led to a fight. Over time, her patience wore thin, and with Julian constantly whispering in her ear, she eventually locked me away in the guest house and forgot about me, never imagining I would take my own life. It was only after my death, when she read my blood-soaked journals, that she finally saw Julian for who he truly was. She dealt with him, and then, with nothing left to live for, she ended her own life. But fate or something else had given her a second chance. And this time, she swore she would never let me go. She held me, her words a torrent of regret. But the more she spoke, the colder my heart became. Why did it take my death for her to see the truth? If she had just set boundaries from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Those years in the guest house were the most desperate of my life. Listening to the staff gossip about how she spoiled Julian, watching from a distance as she doted on him. My love curdled into a deep, abiding hatred, but I was a prisoner, guarded by her men. The hatred from that life surged through me, and my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles went white. I shoved her away, my eyes like chips of ice. So you were reborn too, and you think you can just make it all up to me? Chloe froze, her eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. You were reborn too? Before a flicker of hope could even cross her face, my hand shot out and I slapped her, hard. Why? Why were you reborn? Why can't you just leave me alone? My hand trembled in the air as tears of rage and despair streamed down my face. I thought this new life was a gift, a chance to escape. I wanted to leave the past in the past. But why? Why did she have to come back too? And another thing, I added, my voice shaking. We are divorced. I am engaged to someone else. Her eyes fell on the ring on my finger, and the color drained from her face as if she'd been struck by lightning. She reached for me again, but I took a sharp step back. Chloe, our marriage was over the moment you chose him over me. It was always going to end this way. With that, I turned my back on her. But she grabbed my arm, her voice a desperate plea. Ethan, my being reborn, it has to mean something. It means I have a chance to make things right. Please, just give me one more chance. It was the first time in 2 lifetimes she had ever begged me for anything. In her past life, the sight of my bloody corpse had shattered her, filling her with a regret so profound it followed her into death. The man who had loved her, who had whispered her name with such tenderness, was gone. She remembered our old housekeeper's hateful words, describing how Julian had taunted me, how the staff had abused me in my prison. The memory was a physical pain. Seeing me alive again in this new life, all she wanted was to atone, to earn my forgiveness. I let out a cold, harsh laugh and advanced on her. When I begged you not to choose him, did you listen? When I begged you not to bring him into our home, not to give him my place at your side, did you listen? When I begged you not to give him my future, did you listen? In our last life, when I begged you to come to me after the disaster, when I wrote letters begging you to save me from that house, when I begged you not to lock me away like an animal, did you listen? Chloe, did you ever, even once, listen to me? I backed her into a corner, my voice rising with every question until she had nowhere left to run. I looked at her pale, stricken face, and my voice dropped to a cold, dead whisper. Chloe, stay away from me. Every time I see you, it just makes me sick. It makes me hate you more. Then I turned, walked out of the room, and slammed the door behind me with all the force I could muster. A wave of utter helplessness washed over her. She staggered and fell to the floor, a sharp, twisting pain seizing her heart. The raised voices from inside were sharp but muffled by the heavy door. Olivia was about to burst in when the door flew open and I stumbled out. Seeing the tears streaming down my face, her expression softened with pain, and she pulled me into her arms. Ethan, I clung to her. Olivia, can we please just go home? Olivia never asked what happened in that room. When we got home from the hospital, I collapsed, falling into a deep sickness. She never pressed me for details, simply canceled all her appointments and dedicated herself to nursing me back to health. After she fed me the last spoonful of soup, Olivia handed the empty bowl to her housekeeper. Ethan, she said gently, Chloe heard you were sick. She sent some things over. Throw them out, I said, and closed my eyes. I don't know if it was because she had been reborn or some other reason, but despite the terrible things I'd said, Chloe didn't give up. She stopped trying to see me in person, but every day, a delivery would arrive. I never saw what was in them. Olivia had her staff throw them away immediately. After more than 2 weeks of rest, I was finally strong enough to get out of bed. Just in time, it seemed, as Olivia received an invitation from a friend for a fireworks display by the river. As we got out of the car, I saw her approaching from the other side of the street. The moment Chloe saw me, a light flickered in her dull, lifeless eyes. I ignored her completely, took Olivia's arm, and led her toward the riverbank. The fireworks exploded overhead in dazzling bursts of color, captivating the crowd. We were all staring at the sky when suddenly, a shout cut through the festive atmosphere. Thief! Stop him! The crowd erupted into chaos. Olivia reacted instantly, pulling me through the surging mass of people trying to get to the edge of the chaos. Just then, I heard a sharp cry from behind us, followed by the sickening sound of a blade sinking into flesh. I whipped my head around, but before I could see what had happened, a warm hand covered my eyes, plunging me into darkness. All I could hear were the screams. He's been stabbed. It was Chloe. She had thrown herself behind me, taking the knife that had been meant for me. Luckily, in his panic, the thief's aim was off, and the wound wasn't life-threatening. She must have thought that after she saved my life, I would have no choice but to visit her in the hospital. She would play the victim, say a few pitiful words, and my heart would soften. But I never went. From the day she was admitted to the day she was discharged, I never once appeared. I only sent some nutritional supplements via Olivia's housekeeper, a cold and formal gesture. As the housekeeper was leaving, Chloe finally broke down and asked about me. The housekeeper's reply was polite but brutal. Mr. Ethan mentioned that you never once visited him when he was in the hospital. Besides, he finds the very sight of you nauseating. The incident also left him quite shaken. He hasn't been able to leave the house, so a visit would be impossible. Her hand fell to her side. She covered her face, a bitter, broken sound escaping her lips. I was punishing her for that time in our last life, when she had stayed by Julian's side for weeks, only remembering my existence when he was ready to be discharged. Perhaps this was exactly what she deserved. Meanwhile, the shock of the incident had caused a relapse in my own health. Olivia couldn't stand it anymore. She declared that DC was toxic for me and that we were moving back to Savannah immediately. But we were only halfway through packing when our plans were brought to a screeching halt. Seeing the rare, hard expression on her face, I felt a surge of concern. I sat down beside her. What is it? What's wrong? She grabbed my hand, her brow furrowed. Julian escaped from prison. The simple sentence left me stunned. I hadn't heard his name in years. Apparently, he had escaped during a riot in the prison yard. The entire city was on lockdown. No one knew what a man who'd been imprisoned for years might be capable of. And since Chloe and I were the two people he had been closest to, we were now considered high-risk targets. The police launched a citywide manhunt while assigning protection details to both of us. Olivia refused to leave my side, terrified that something might happen to me. After a few days of being virtual prisoners in our own home, we got the news. Julian had been caught. He had tried to get to Chloe at her residence, but her security was too tight. In the ensuing struggle, he managed to grab a guard's gun and fired wildly as Chloe was getting out of her car. She dodged the first shot, but not the second. She was rushed to the hospital with a massive chest wound. Julian was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to death, with the execution scheduled for the day after tomorrow. Before his final sentencing, he requested one last visitor, me. Staring at him through the bars of the visiting room, I was filled with a strange sense of detachment. I had seen so many versions of Julian. In my last life, he had been smug and triumphant to the very end, even wearing the watch Chloe had originally bought for me. In this life, he had also lived comfortably under her care. Nothing like the creature before me now, gaunt and hollow-cheeked in a ragged prison jumpsuit, his eyes bloodshot and his hair matted. He looked like a cornered animal. In our last life, Julian had died a pampered, beautiful boy. This time, without me to grease the wheels of their affair, they had gone from lovers to mortal enemies. The thought made me laugh out loud. The sound seemed to enrage him. He lunged forward, snarling, trying to get at me, but the chains holding him to the chair held fast. He could only strain against them, his face a mask of impotent fury. "Ethan, I'll kill you. Why did you have to live?" The smile vanished from my face. In that moment, I knew Julian had been reborn too. Good. It was time to settle the score from our last life. Why? I'll tell you why. Because you were the one who had no morals, who preyed on a married woman. And she was just as disgusting, leaving her husband again and again to be with you. Tell me, Julian, did you enjoy living my life using my things? It doesn't matter. She was just trash I threw away, and you were welcome to her. Now look at the two of you. One is knocking on death's door, and the other is about to be executed. I call that karma. I stood up, gripping the bars that separated us. Every bit of suffering you two put me through in our last life is coming back to you now. But I'm not going to let you die so easily, Julian. Death is too quick. It wouldn't even begin to make up for what you did to me. When I thought he hadn't been reborn, I was content to let this life's events play out. He had managed to destroy himself without any help from me. But now that I knew the truth, things were different. It was time for him to experience the nightmare he had created for me. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The sight of it seemed to chill him to the bone. His angry tirade died in his throat, his expression shifting from malice to pure terror. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked away, leaving him to scream my name into the empty air. Perhaps because Julian had also targeted me, Olivia agreed to help without a moment's hesitation. With a few quiet phone calls, Julian's death sentence was commuted. He was transferred to a maximum security federal prison, a place filled with the most violent criminals in the country. There would be no escape this time. His life would be a living hell. Julian's rebirth was a reminder that loose ends needed to be tied up. 3 months after Chloe was admitted to the hospital, I paid her a visit. After 3 days of surgery, the doctors had managed to save her life. But the damage was permanent. She would require constant care for the rest of her days. Her brilliant career was over. She was forced into medical retirement. I looked at the broken woman in the hospital bed and felt nothing. I sat down beside her and took a thick, cream-colored envelope from my bag. "I'm getting married." It was our wedding invitation. The elegant script seemed to burn her eyes. She stared at it for a long time before her trembling hand finally reached out to take it. She knew, in that moment, that it was truly over. There was no hope left for us. But a bitter resentment still lingered. The man who had loved her across 2 lifetimes was now going to be another woman's husband. "Ethan," she whispered, "if Julian hadn't been a part of this life, would we have made it?" I met her gaze and let out a soft, humorless laugh. "If it wasn't Julian, it would have been someone else. Our marriage didn't fail because of him, Chloe. It failed because of you. You have a fatal flaw. You mistake pity for love. Any pathetic man who crosses your path becomes your project. And Julian was the ultimate project, a deathbed request from your best friend. She asked you to look after him, not to make him the center of your universe. You still don't understand the difference between responsibility and love. You used duty as an excuse to abandon me again and again. Your constant overstepping destroyed my reputation and our marriage. Did you ever once stop to think about how I felt? In the world we lived in, gossip can be a death sentence. If you had just been honest from the start, if you had just admitted you'd fallen for him, we could have ended things cleanly. It didn't have to be like this. I stood up to leave, not looking at her again. As my hand touched the doorknob, I heard a faint whisper from behind me.
I'm sorry.
My hand paused for a fraction of a second, but I didn't turn around. The days leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Olivia and I were planning to move back to Savannah permanently after we were married, so there was much to arrange. We both felt uneasy about leaving her grandfather behind and offered to have him move with us, but he just waved us off. Why would an old man like me want to get in the way of you youngsters? Don't you worry about me. I'll be well taken care of. Just call and write on the holidays. And a visit now and then would be nice. So we let the matter drop. The following days were filled with visiting relatives and delivering invitations, a process that left my pockets full of congratulatory cash gifts. We shopped for everything we would need for our new home, then sent it all ahead with Olivia's housekeeper, who would get the house ready for our arrival. Then came the most important part, our wedding attire. I pored over design books, overwhelmed by the choices. It took an entire night of discussion with Olivia before we finally settled on the perfect designs. On the night before our wedding, tradition dictated that we shouldn't see each other. Even though she was just in the room next door, she sent her housekeeper over with a thick letter for me. Reading her beautiful, loving words, I felt like a giddy teenager, and I slept soundly, my dreams sweet. The next day, surrounded by our friends and family, Olivia and I stood before the officiant. She teared up as she looked at me in my deep crimson suit. Under the watchful eyes of our loved ones, we exchanged vows and were pronounced husband and wife. As the room erupted in cheers, I leaned in and gently kissed my bride. As the evening wound down, I helped a tipsy Olivia back to our bridal suite. I had just laid her on the bed and was turning to get a warm cloth for her face when she suddenly sat up and pulled me down with her. In a single, fluid motion, she had me pinned beneath her. Before I could speak, her lips were on mine. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, but inside, the temperature was rising. The love between us, a delicate and intricate thing, wove itself around us, binding us together. The rain fell throughout the night. As the first rays of dawn slipped through the curtains, I looked at my sleeping wife, my heart full. I leaned over and gently kissed her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled, pulling me in for another kiss. After saying our goodbyes to her grandfather, we headed for the train station. As we were about to board, I saw Chloe one last time. She was standing at a distance, and though I couldn't hear her, I could read her lips. Be well. I didn't acknowledge her. I just got on the train. The train's whistle blew, a long, mournful sound. I sat by the window, watching the city shrink behind us, a surprising pang of sadness in my chest. I didn't know when or if I would ever be back. Olivia rested her head on my shoulder, a silent, comforting presence. When we arrived back in Savannah, the entire neighborhood seemed to be waiting for us at the tea shop. Their warm, enthusiastic greetings filled our hearts. We passed out wedding favors we'd brought from DC and caught up with all our friends. Ethan, you're back. Thank goodness. I'm in desperate need of a new suit. Married, are you? Congratulations. We wish you both a lifetime of happiness. That evening, with the lanterns on our porch glowing softly, Olivia and I sat together on the sofa, looking out at the quiet street and talking about nothing in particular. Life settled into a peaceful, happy rhythm. On our third day back, I couldn't sit still any longer and reopen my shop. To drum up new business, I had brought back several fashion magazines from DC and created a few new designs based on the latest trends. The moment I put them in the window, customers flocked in. My 2 apprentices were swamped, and even Olivia had to close her own shop to come and help with the rush. After the last customer had left and my apprentices had gone home for the day, I sank into a chair by the door, exhausted, rubbing my aching shoulders. Olivia came over and started to massage my back, but just then, my stomach let out a loud, embarrassing growl. My face flushed. In the chaos of the day, I had completely forgotten to eat. Olivia just laughed, rolled up her sleeves, and disappeared into the small kitchen in the back of the shop. She returned a few minutes later with a steaming bowl of noodle soup. The simple, delicious meal filled my empty stomach. She sat with me while I ate, occasionally adding a bit of pickled vegetable to my bowl. Don't just fuss over me, I said, covering my bowl with my hand and nodding toward hers. Your own soup is getting cold. She smiled and finally started to eat her own dinner. I thought our life would continue on in this peaceful way forever, but one day, An urgent letter arrived from DC. Seeing the deep frown on Olivia's face as she read it, my own heart began to pound with anxiety. What does it say? She opened her mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it and simply handed the letter to me. As I read, my own expression grew grim. It was from Chloe. On the surface, it was a letter of apology, but reading between the lines, it was clearly a goodbye, a final farewell. What is this supposed to mean? Olivia looked at me, her expression full of sorrow. After a long silence, she sighed. Her health never recovered after Julian shot her. That, combined with everything else. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left. I crumpled the letter in my fist. So what? She's not asking you to go back. She just wanted to say goodbye. Oh, and this was in the envelope too. Olivia held out a small, velvet box. Inside was a ring. I knew instantly that she had had it custom-made, a perfect replica of the wedding band that had never fit me. Chloe was dying. I felt a complex tangle of emotions, but grief wasn't one of them. She had brought this on herself. It was better for both of us that we never saw each other again. I didn't want to hear another word about her. I held the crumpled letter to the flame of a nearby candle. I watched as the edges blackened and curled, then tossed it into the metal wastebasket to burn. I started up the stairs, then paused and looked back at Olivia. Get rid of the ring, I said. I don't want it. In a private room in a DC hospital, Chloe lay dying, listening as one of her aides gave her a final report. The package you sent to Savannah was delivered and signed for, ma'am, but there has been no reply. She managed a weak smile and shook her head. That's all right. You may go. The aide, his heart heavy with pity, quietly closed the door behind him. She turned her head to the window, her mind drifting back to the day we first met. It had been an autumn day much like this one. I had been wearing a crisp white shirt, my ears turning red as I asked, "Are you Chloe?" She couldn't remember her reply. All she could remember was the look of utter devastation in my eyes after she began her obsession with Julian. She had promised to love and care for me for the rest of our lives. Promise she had broken. The memories of 2 lifetimes blurred together as she felt the end approaching. With a great effort, she pulled a ring from the pocket of her robe. It was the one she had placed on my finger on our wedding day. The one that had never fit. I had worn it only once before putting it away for good. Just like our marriage. She had betrayed me once, and I had never looked back. Ethan, she whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. In the next life, please, don't ever meet me. Her hand fell limp at her side, the ring slipping from her fingers and clattering softly on the floor.